And good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our twice weekly Bible study. Sorry I'm getting on just a little bit late this afternoon, but sometimes stuff happens, so you get there just as quick and as best as you can, so sorry about that, but we'll try to do better next time. But we are working our way through the Gospel of Luke on a cool but lovely October afternoon today. And we are in Luke's Gospel. We're in chapter 2, and we're at verses numbered 21 and 24. This is the Christmas story, as we understand it and have known it throughout the years, and much beloved as it is through Luke's Virgin. And now this moves beyond the Bethlehem events and moves forward 8 days. So we'll start reading at chapter 2, verse 2. When the 8 days necessarily prior to circumcision had elapsed, he was called by the name of Jesus, the name by which he had been called by the angel before he had been conceived in the womb. When the time which, according to the laws of Moses, must precede the ceremony of purification had elapsed, they brought him up to Jerusalem to present him to the Lord in accordance with the regulations in the Lord's law, which says, "Every male that opens the womb shall be called holy before the Lord, and to make the sacrifice which the regulation in the Lord's law lays down, that is, a pair of doves or 2 young pigeons, which is also known as the poor man's offering and sacrifice." It's not a lamb or a goat or a bull or anything like that. Those were sacrifices that rich people made. This is more of the common man, everyday man, because the vast majority of children that would be coming before this priest and to be dedicated would be children born to the common folk, the poor people, or the folk of the land. So 8 days, and he's brought up to be circumcised. That is the way of the Jews, and this was a very sacred and important ceremony. Circumcision was so sacred that the only day that it could not be carried out on was a Sabbath day. It had to be done in the temple if you lived within the general vicinity of Jerusalem, and it was just simply something that was essential just for the Jews in that day and time. It just had to be done. Now, the naming of the child also was not done until that time. Parents could speculate as to what shall we name this child and come up with various ideas, but it was not official until the priest asks the question and the father says his name is, and in this case, Jesus. Another reason why it's so important is it's considered to be the redemption of the firstborn. It talks about the opening, every male child that opens the womb. That means the firstborn. That's a boy. Again, we get back to the significance of the differences, the way the genders were and were not valued back then. If it was a female child, everybody that gathered for the birth event, musicians and everybody, would go away silent and sorrowing, because they wanted it to be a boy. That's just the way it worked. We've come a long way since then. We've got a long way to go, but still, we've come a long way. So, and this is according to Exodus chapter 13, verse 2, every male child, every child, both not only human, but also cattle, was considered to be sacred to the Lord, and the law lays down that they had to be redeemed from the Lord so that they could go about a normal life. Therefore, there was the ceremony that's called the redemption of the firstborn. Now, Jesus had brothers and sisters, and his brothers would not have to go through that ceremony because Jesus is the firstborn of his mother. Now, as we get into the whole idea of the virgin birth, while he may be the firstborn, and he is the firstborn of Mary, he is not biologically the son of Joseph. So how does that all tie in? Well, that's getting to be a little bit nitpicky, but you get the idea here that as far as society was concerned, as far as the hierarchy, the Jewish hierarchy was concerned, Joseph was Jesus' father. And so it goes from there. Now, there also is the purification after childbirth. After a child is born, a woman is considered to be unclean for a certain number of days. She is actually, if it was a boy, she was unclean for 40 days. If it was a girl, she's unclean for 8 days. Again, you see the discrepancy between male and female there. She could go about her household duties, her daily household type of stuff, but during that time she can't enter the temple, the synagogue for any religious purposes or ceremony whatsoever. That's found in the book of Leviticus, chapter 12. If you want to know a lot of the temple etiquette, temple rules, why the Jews did a lot of the things that they did, and have a flavor for why Jesus did a lot of the things that he did, you need to go back to the books of the Pentateuch. Specifically, we get a little bit of it in the book of Exodus, but even more so you get it in the book of Leviticus, and the book of Deuteronomy lays down a whole lot of this law. In one sense, it's ponderous reading, it's slow reading, it's not easy, because it's dealing with stuff that we just have a hard time looking at that and thinking that way and going, what's that all about? But to them, to the Jews, it was extremely important. This was, to them, what we would call high church. This was their rules. These were their regulations. This is the way they did business. And you better do it right. So you have the purification of the child. You find that in Leviticus chapter 12. There was also to be a sacrifice given. They were allowed to give 2 turtle doves or 2 young pigeons, poor person's offering. This would cost relatively little, but they had to be temple bought, because they had to be temple certified, which means they still had to pay for them. They didn't have to pay near as much as they would have to for a lamb or something, or a goat, but still. And you know where that money went. That went right into the pockets of the high priests, the Pharisees, and everybody else. So, and in Joseph's family, which was probably, although Joseph was gainfully employed as a carpenter, he still was probably day to day just like any common laborer would have been. I don't think he was making a whole lot of money as a carpenter back in those days. But these ceremonies all look to be kind of strange to us. Circumcision, the redemption of the firstborn, the purification after childbirth. But that's the way they did things back then. So we need to realize that. And at that point in time, that's when Jesus receives his name. Now, we go up to Luke chapter 2, and we're starting reading now in the verse number 25. Now, look you is a common expression in Luke's gospel. You'll see it. He uses it a lot. And when he does that, he's trying to draw attention to what follows immediately after. So just so you know, that may not show up in the translation that you're using. Mark does that as well, only he uses the word straightway or immediately, without hesitation. And the literal translation for Luke's Greek, which is better Greek, is now look you. In other words, look, pay attention here. Look at this. There was a man in Jerusalem named Simeon. This man was good and pious. He was waiting for the comforting of Israel, and the Holy Spirit was upon him. He had received a message from the Holy Spirit that he would not see death until he had seen the Lord's anointed one. So he came in the Spirit to the temple precincts. And when his parents brought in the child Jesus to do regarding him the customary ceremonies laid down by the law, he took the baby into his arms and blessed God and said, Now, O Lord, as you said, let your servant depart in peace, because my eyes have seen your instrument of salvation, which you have prepared before all the people, a light to bring your revelation to the Gentiles and the glory of your people Israel. His father and his mother were amazed at what was said about him. And Simeon blessed them and said to Mary his mother, Look you, This child is appointed to be the cause whereby many in Israel will fall, and many rise, and for a sign which will meet with much opposition. As for you, a sword will pierce your soul, and all this will happen that the inner thoughts of many hearts may be revealed. Now, Simeon makes his appearance here in Luke. Anna, also who's a prophetess, will also make her appearance here. Now, all Jews, you look at this, all Jews regarded Israel as the chosen people, without exclusion, really, to be a special people. But they also thought that, that there was a lot of, what's the best way to say it, doubt in those days, because they had been under oppression, first by the Greeks and then by the Romans for several hundred years at this point. Actually, it was the Babylonians, and then it was the Persians, and then it was the Greeks after they were able to come back from being exiled in Babylon, and then eventually it became the Romans, because the Jews asked the Romans to come in and kick out the Greeks, and they did, but they came and they stayed as well. It's like unwanted company. There they are, and there they stay. So now, to bring forth this kind of a proclamation that this is the one, this is the anointed one, this is the one that we have hope for. They didn't really understand exactly what all was going to be involved and what it would entail. And you can see that throughout Jesus' ministry. He was very much misunderstood. The people acknowledged his power. They acknowledged that he was special. But then they kept saying, "Lord, save us, Hosanna," as he came into to Jerusalem got a brain freeze here. When he came into Jerusalem, was being proclaimed there before the crucifixion. And Palm Sunday, my goodness, can't think. And they were saying, "Save us." They wanted him to be a military Messiah. They wanted to be delivered. They wanted to ascend onto the world stage as a maker and a shaker within power. The Israelites never were, if you read your history closely, they were never a maker and shaker. Palestine was wedged in between several different empires on what basically was a land bridge between Africa, Europe, and the Far East. And so you would have countries like Syria to the north. You'd have Assyria, Babylon, and eventually the Persians to the east. You'd have Egypt to the south and the west, Greece to the north and the northwest. And so they were always surrounded by greater countries, bigger countries, and they were always in the way because all of these other countries were trying to conquer one another. And for the Babylonians, for example, to get to the Egyptians, they had to basically go through Palestine. And Israel was constantly being pushed and pulled into alliances, and they often made bad choices. And this is why the prophets in the Old Testament would tell them, beware of foreign alliances, it's going to get you into trouble. And you see their history is just fraught with that kind of thing, especially after you get past the early kings of Saul, David, and Solomon. During those times, the times of Israel's greatest success and affluence and the expansion of the kingdom, which expanded the most under Solomon. Basically, the other powers of the region were preoccupied with other things and they let them alone. They ignored them because Israel was such a small player in the stage of things, the world stage. But as the Eastern powers, Babylon, the Medo-Persians, and others, began to ascend, it became a different story. And hence, they become an embattled people. And you see them having problems with the Syrians, the Persians, the Egyptians, the Greeks, and eventually Rome. And that brings us to this point in time. And so they've been afflicted by this, and they remember back to David and Solomon. And, as you look back on things in hindsight, things look greater than what they actually were. And they're thinking, if only we could go back to those times, the good old days. And that's what they want the Messiah to do. Jesus, on the other hand, although he would have made the perfect military Messiah, when you stop and think about it, Jesus was the perfect military leader. He could feed the troops with just a small amount of food, dividing the bread and the loaves and the fishes. He could heal the wounded and the sick. He could even raise the dead. And he had all sorts of amazing power so that he could overthrow armies on his own. Perfect leader. He's all things. He's the quartermaster. He's the armorer. He's the brains. He's the power and the muscle behind it all. No wonder the people were saying, Lord, Lord, save us here. And so this is one of the significant things about Simeon's proclamation here. Now, whose attention did Simeon's words catch? Mary and Joseph's. Actually, poor old Joseph, he kind of fades from the scene here slowly after playing an active part in Matthew's gospel in the early part, and being here, being with Mary and going to Bethlehem, and just a few other cameos with Jesus when he's 12 years old in the temple. We don't know anything else about Joseph. Poor guy. Talk about insignificance or being a footnote along the way. And yet Joseph's part is extremely important because he was the one at this point who gives Jesus his name. Nobody else could do that because he was the father and the authorities saw him as the biological father. He had to give Jesus his name, which the angel Gabriel had already announced prior to Jesus even being conceived. He told Mary. He told Joseph in a dream. In Matthew, we're told that, so they knew. And so they probably got some of the same looks and questions that Zechariah and Elizabeth got in naming John, especially because at first Elizabeth was the one who was doing the talking, not Zechariah. And they're going, John? There's nobody in your family by the name of John. They didn't have the freedom to give names back then that we do today. Names meant something, but also names were affiliated with families. And so, John, what are you talking about? And so, when it comes here now to naming, Jesus was named before he was even conceived and announced by Gabriel. So, there we have him. Now, let's move up to verse 36 here in chapter 2. Here comes now the prophetess Anna. Simeon is not the only one who's making big-time prophetic announcements here. We have it coming from Simeon, a guy who's told you will not die until you've seen the Lord's anointed, but also Anna. There was a prophetess called Anna. She was the daughter of Phanuel, and she belonged to the tribe of Asher. She was far advanced in years. She had lived with her husband ever since 7 years after she came to womanhood, and now she was a widow of 84 years of age. She never left the temple, and day and night she worshipped with fastings and with prayers. At that very time she came up, and she began to give thanks to God, and she kept speaking about him to all those who were waiting expectantly for the deliverance of Jerusalem. And when they had completed everything with the Lord's law lays down, they returned to Galilee to their own town of Nazareth. And the child grew bigger and stronger, and he was filled with wisdom, and God's grace was with him. So, now we have the other player in this story. We have Simeon, who is a prophet. Now we have Anna, who is a prophetess, and she had known the bitterness of life. She was a widow, had been for some time apparently, and yet she had not grown bitter. She had not grown sorrowful. She was there in the temple, worshiping the Lord, praising the Lord constantly, and the Holy Spirit is upon her, as the Holy Spirit was upon Simeon. This is a common expression that Luke will use. He will talk about the presence and the power of the Holy Spirit in the individual's life. We see that with Simeon. We see that also here with Anna. And the Spirit of God is upon them, and they make big-time predictions as to who this child was going to be. Now, Anna was also, Simeon was old. Anna's really old. She's 84. Now, we may not think so much of 84 being real old in this day and age, but back then, you better believe it, that was really old. And it says she never ceased to hope. I had one gal in the nursing home where I served as chaplain. She was 100 years old, and she would say to me from time to time, I think God has forgotten me. I'm just here and he's going to leave me here. That's losing hope. That's being bitter. And I can understand why. She was blind. She was bedfast. Who would want to live like that? And yet she said, there's nothing I can do. It's here I am, and I lay here and I wait. Anna, on the other hand, she's 84, and she had never, ever ceased to hope. Age has not held her back, made her angry. It says she never ceased to worship. She was always in an attitude of worship. She spent her time in God's house with God's people, worshiping God. It says she never ceased to pray. Public worship is important, but private worship is too. Public prayer is important. Private prayer is too. And we need to keep those things in mind. We need to be people of prayer, both publicly and privately. And our prayers need to impact our life and shape who we are and what we are. Anna was that kind of a person, and the Spirit of the Lord was upon her. And so Jesus goes home now with his parents into the hometown, and there he's going to be. And he says he grows in wisdom and strength, and we will get a look ahead at him as he, in the next verse, not the next chapter, when they'll talk about him in the temple when he's 12 years old, which is really the only account we have of Jesus as a child. There are what we call infancy stories of Jesus as a baby doing miraculous things and as a child growing up. And then none of them sound like the Jesus that I know, and they're not canonical. They're not considered to be a part of the canon. You can look them up if you want to. You can Google them, the infancy stories of Jesus, and you'll see some interesting things there. But don't give them any stock, because they're really not much of anything. But that's what we'll get into on Wednesday, this coming Wednesday. So I hope that you'll see you then. I hope I'll be on time instead of being late, and we'll just see how that goes. But in the meantime, I hope the Lord blesses you real good.